Yesterday, Laurent Jalabert completed the French Day of celebration with a lone win on Bastille Day at Mende in the Tour de France. His gains were more than he could ever have expected, as he recouped almost 6 minutes with a long escape. Jalabert is now up to third overall behind Miguel Indurain. So Once continue their push and now have 3 men in the first 5. British rider Max Chianri is 48th and Sean Yates is 92nd. And below me this morning, the start town of Mende. The riders preparing to go into what many people feel here in France is the nicest region, the area of the Tarn Gorges. Well, this has become a main centre for tourism over the last few years. It's also a centre for French art. All of the towns in this region show the evidence of their Roman occupation. And by the way, it's also the home of one Laurent Jalabert. This type of scenery will be with us all day today between Mende and Revel. It's another difficult, undulating ride with very few flat roads. The race remains on course as the fastest ever, and this was evidenced again yesterday by 7 more riders giving up. It leaves only 134 on the rollout today. And Laurent Jalabert today can be assured of great support all of the way to Revel today, because he lives not too many kilometres away from the finish. Miguel Indurain wearing his 52nd yellow jersey today. Now that puts him in 3rd place in the rankings of the most coveted wearer of the symbol of yellow for the Tour de France. The man who's won 96 of them is Eddy Merckx. 2nd place is Bernard Hinault. And at the first sprint, a breakaway had already established. Lance Armstrong winning this sprint at Rivière-sur-Tarn after 67 kilometres. Kengialta 2nd, Uchikov 3rd. The other man in the breakaway, Bueno Hora, the lead over the field, 6.5 minutes. Back in the field though, Neil Stevens, the hero, the domestique of the Once team in that breakaway yesterday. He wants to say hello to a few friends.
I can say good day to my mum, my brother, my sister, and all my mates, and to say good day to the rest of the Aussies, the people that are over here supporting me, the British as well, but especially the Aussies. Good on you.
Well, the riders can expect what they call the canicule this afternoon, the hot and humid weather that reigns over this part of France. Temperatures soaring to 30 degrees Celsius, extremely humid, and still the possibility of a thundercloud late in the afternoon, but the wind will be a northwesterly, up to 30 kilometres an hour.
And well, we have to say that the next item is rather bad news, because Sean Yates has decided to abandon the Tour de France in the opening miles this morning.
Just got tendonitis. There's no point in continuing. No, it just came yesterday, but I've had it before in the Tour de DuPont, and it was just like one way.
And now the riders are trying to chase down the leading 4 here. The gap is coming down, but they have an awful lot of work to do, because during the day now, that breakaway has built up to a lead of over 18 minutes and 5 seconds. The last check we got, it's down to 16 minutes and 50 seconds. Just to remind you who's in that breakaway: Sergei Uchikov, Bruno Kengialta, Hernan Bueno Hora, that's the man that finished 2nd to Max Chianri down at Saint-Etienne, and the other rider is Lance Armstrong of the American Motorola team. They've been away virtually all day. They've been sharing all of the small climbs and the sprints, but now it looks as though the order's gone out, Paul, for Novel to try and catch them because of their sprinter Abdu Japarov.
And once again, I have to say that Miguel Indurain has played a tactical masterpiece, because he's waited, he's just let this break get clear, and he realises that Abdu Japarov doesn't have a victory, and he's forced the Novel team to come up, but another team of sprinters there has also moved to the front. The pink jerseys, you'll notice, of the Telecom squad, who have Eric Zabel in their midst.
16 minutes 30, so they're working well together now. There we can see Bjarne Riis. He slipped to 4th overall in the classification yesterday, despite finishing up with the front runners. But time is what matters. The man in the green jersey, who's built himself a good lead in that competition now over Abdu Japarov, that of course is now Laurent Jalabert. Jaja, as all the notices are saying, along the road. And before we started our commentary today, we spoke to one of the local French people, because we left our vehicle by their house, and asked if that would be okay. And the man invited us in, and he wanted us to have lunch, and we said, what do you think of Jalabert yesterday? He said, oh, he lives just down the road. He said, I cried for 2 hours after he won the stage, and he was full of admiration for the work that Melchior Mauri did to keep Jalabert right up at the front. And then he said, and the poor man from Australia, Stephens, he said, he rode so well for Jalabert.
Well, that just goes to show how important it was for the French to get that victory on Bastille Day. And until we spoke with that gentleman, I really wasn't sure that it was that important for them. But obviously for Laurent Jalabert and the people who live in this region, it was an extremely big thing. But the race today is in Jalabert's region, and there's a 4-man breakaway. And Jalabert, I feel, will take a rest and leave it up to everybody else to try and chase down, because the Once squad are thinking of the next 2 days in the mountains where they will try again to dislodge Miguel Indurain.
So we're looking down on the main field. It's all Novell today instead of the blue and white of Benesto. They want this breakaway back. They are cutting into the lead. There is still time to do it. It's only a question of whether they'll be strong enough now to bring those 4 back into the fold. And I'm not too sure, in fact, Paul, they will be.
There's an awful long way to go, and it's a very tough terrain out there, and it's 4 riders have been at the front, and you know, these roads over here, they really don't roll very well, so it may well sap a lot of their strength out, but they all want to succeed, and for the moment nobody's playing around in that group. They're all doing their fair share of work at the front, and it may well be too difficult for Novell and 1 or 2 riders from Telecom to pull it back before the finish.
Little Bueno Hora, he moved up into 6th place in the mountains when he won all of the climbs, when he was in that breakaway at Max Chandry. He's been helping himself to some of the climbs today. He won the 2nd category. He was surprisingly only 4th rather in the 2nd category climb of the Col de Sillé. Kengi Alta was riding very strongly on that mountain, but he did win the smaller climbs, so he's going to be picking up points today. That's why Virenque has been chipping out the points for the best placed of the rest on the climbs, because he knew that Bueno Hora was taking points, and if he comes strong into the Pyrenees and he's going down to the area where he'll know what everything is, although he's Colombian, he rides on the Spanish team, and in the Pyrenees by tradition most of the people who watch there are Spanish. Here's the latest check, 16 minutes and 12 seconds. It's hardly tumbling down.
It isn't tumbling down as quickly, I think, as the Novell squad would like. Another man in all kinds of difficulty at the back. You know, this is the Chazal squad. They really haven't had a great Tour de France this year. They were brought in as one of the 5 wild cards, and this is Gilles de Leon, the man that many expected would be a leader of the team, and he finished last on the stage yesterday. This is Eddie Bowman's from the Novell squad on the front here at the moment, and you can almost feel how difficult it is. It's not a bunch that's flying along at the moment. It's because of the difficulty of the roads in this area. It really is hard to try and organize a chase. So that's why I think the lead that those 4 riders have at the moment, which is still over the 16-minute mark, is a lead that they will be able to conserve a certain amount of before they get down to the finish here.
So they're now coming up towards the top of the climb, and this is the main field. Over the top, of course, many minutes ahead. We've had Kengi Alta leading Uchikov and Armstrong, but the main field are now over the top of the Côte de Bel Air. So they've done 180 kilometers, and now the field are going to have to really get down to things. Here's the final time check before we take a break. It's 15 minutes and 2 seconds. My goodness me, they've got some work to do yet.
When he won the Tour in 1947, Jean Robic was a man ahead of his time. The story of the first rider to don a crash at, coming up after the break. Although he was small, Jean Robic, the winner of the 1947 Tour, was a real hard man. His nickname was La Briquette, the brick, although maybe it should have been La Casque, because he was the first man in the peloton to wear the protective headgear. And with good reason. Robic had a metal plate in his head, the result of a bad crash. At the time, most riders were racing on faith, hope and a cloth cap, and even once the casque had finally caught on, the design remained the same for over 30 years. The man who brought headgear into the late 20th century was Greg LeMond, and since so much of what he did seemed to work, this time riders were quicker to copy. Nowadays, of course, headgear isn't only for safety, it's for speed. The teardrop time trial helmet has been around for a few tours now, with this year's design twist being a sort of Neanderthal overhang at the front. And perhaps to get around the fact that they feel foolish appearing in public with heads shaped like tadpoles, some of the vainer members of the peloton have got out the paint and started customizing, particularly on the more macho Italian teams. Claudio Chiappucci started it all with his El Diablo helmet, and he's since been joined by the likes of Maurizio Fondries, the Pink Panther, and Mario Cipollini, whose Lion King model comes in both regular and time trial editions. When he was in yellow, Laurent Jalabert had the matching jersey and helmet, while Evgeny Berzin saw his chance to stand out on television by being the only Gavis rider not to wear one during the team time trial. Which brings us on to the question that's been troubling many people. When is Marco Pantani wearing a helmet and when isn't he? Well, it's hard to tell, and when he starts selling advertising space on that head, it'll be almost impossible.
Well, thanks, Gary. Well, these four riders are still clear. No real cause for crash helmets today because they've been out in front, just the four of them, beneath the hot sun. And Lance Armstrong is now beginning to get a little bit agitated here. I think he's anxious to try and break up this group. They've still got to go around a small climb before they plunge back down to the finish in Revel. And there is Lance, and going through Sergei Uchikov, and behind him is Hernan Buenahora, and the man in the blue, number 14 there, is Bruno Kengialta. We feel Kengialta is the danger man, and Armstrong, I think that's why, Paul, he is now following him in the line.
He's dropped to the back here. You know, the riders will have studied the route map. Normally a team manager the night before a race will actually plan it out on a map, a detailed map of the area, and they will know by looking at the profile how difficult this final circuit is going to be. They will have talked about it, discussed the tactics, and I know that Armstrong likes a difficulty towards the end of a race. He likes something to use as a launch pad because he loves to win on his own, and that may be what he's thinking about. But you know, Bruno Kengialta is a professional for a long time, and he's a very intelligent rider, and he'll be waiting for a move like that.
Well, there's absolutely no chance now that the main field will come back as we pass under the 10 kilometres to go banner for the four leaders. In between there are three chasers, but they too are in double figures behind, and they're Marco Milesi, David Perona, and Frankie Andreu, also of Motorola, but he is still playing the policeman and is not working with either Perona or Milesi. And I feel he would make better progress if he did start to work, because they're only a minute plus in front of the main field. The main field, as always at this stage of the race, is being led at a casual jaunter by the Benesto boys. There we're seeing the time gap, 16 minutes and 40 seconds, I thought I read there, Paul, back to this group here. So they're losing ground.
They are doing, but they have no intention of chasing. They're quite happy to let those riders in front have their freedom. But at the moment, it was interesting to note that in that front group, Buenahora had been at the front, and there is the attack. That Buenahora was at the front. He dropped back and waited for the other riders to take over the pace setting, and he tried to go straight away, but they were waiting for that move.
Well, of course they were. He's the climber in the race. This is the last climb of the day, and it's not as steep as we appear to have thought, because it's only about a kilometre to the summit now. And Buenahora, almost a tentative move there, but they were stuck to him like glue, and it was rather interesting to see. They all went at the same time to grab him and haul him back in.
Well, these four riders at the moment are going to be extremely nervous. In fact, it's becoming a little bit of a sprint race at the moment. They're looking at each other at the back, in the back of the main field there. That was Bo Hamburger from the TVM squad trying to get clear, but that is over 16 minutes behind the four leaders at the moment. Miguel Indurain just letting anybody attack who wants to, but he won't let Zula go, he won't let Rominger go, and now Uchikov has gone with 1 kilometre to go to the climb.
So the next move from Uchikov, we've seen Uchikov's team manager up here a number of times, and now he's probably said you've got to try a kilometre from the top of the climb. Lance Armstrong straight on him here, and that's a good move, and he looks cool.
And in fact, behind race radio telling me that in fact the two riders, Buenahora and Kengialta, are watching each other. They don't want to make the move first, and these two riders have got a great lead.
Well, that's amazing. The man who we feel had the chance of the stage win, Bruno Kengialta, is now playing cat and mouse with a Colombian climber who couldn't win a sprint, and he's allowing these two riders ahead, and they've got the gap on the climb as they go up towards the summit here of the last small climb of the day. Lance Armstrong keeping an eye on exactly what is happening around him, but he could now work with Sergei Uchikov, and it could go.
Well, that was a superb move. You know, he waited for somebody to attack. He knew the attack was going to come on this climb, but what does surprise me as well is that Kengialta waited to see if Buenahora would move. Buenahora was the first man to attack, so obviously he used an awful lot of energy, so Kengialta should have gone straight away without any kind of a pause.
Well, this happens so many times. This is why the sport is so good. Riders are affected by other things other than pure strength. They're now 8 kilometres or 5 miles from the finish. Uchikov is along with Lance Armstrong. They really have got to keep going together now, because they'll dive off this mountain. Before you know it, they'll be in the streets of Revel. Well,
I think you said that because Lance Armstrong really is reveling in the glory at the moment. He's so happy to be at the front of the Tour de France. He had a very hard time in the mountains. He tried to stay with the leaders. He tried to get across to Alex Zula, but at the moment, this really is his terrain. When this man feels he can get a victory, he just wants to go for it.
Well, that's where we are, 237.5 kilometres done today of the 245 on the menu. And what a long, hot day this has been for everybody in the Tour de France. It has been a real scorcher.
And Armstrong is not afraid of the heat. He comes from Austin in Texas and loves the heat. And it may well be today that the heat has been on his side. But when they get to the finish, a two-man sprint is always a very dangerous thing. It's a scary thing because if you make a mistake, even Max Chiandri a couple of days ago knew that he was stronger and faster than Buenahora in the sprint in Saint-Étienne. But he always felt up until the last moment that he could make a crazy mistake.
And just look at this crowd away over in the hillside above the little town of Revel. The cycle sport is so popular here, the British flag flying there too. And Armstrong not contesting the banner prize for the King of the Mountains, going calmly over in second place ahead of Uchikov. These two riders are now going to combine. Now, this is a difficult one. I think Armstrong would be the better sprinter.
Well, he should be. He's an extremely strong man, and I've told you before, he may not be a pure sprinter, but he will fight with energy. He'll fight with his courage. He'll fight with everything he's got to get around this man from Russia, Sergei Uchikov. But the two of them have to work together because don't forget there are still two riders behind. It's about 150 meters at the moment, but still I feel that Bruno Kenghielter made a drastic mistake in not attacking straight away once they saw these two riders move clear.
And just look at this, the riders not bothering at all. Benesto have the complete front row and they're backing off the race. So little Buenahora could be a top 10 rider by the end of the stage if they keep this up. Inside 2 miles to the line now, and Armstrong is not slowing down at all. There's no cat and mouse between these two. There can't be. Otherwise the two riders behind will be straight back up to them. They're trying to judge the effort at the front without making too much now because they want to save something for the sprint. They're going to have to decide now how they're going to outmaneuver one another when they make what is a right turn towards the finish, and then it's a very difficult approach to the finish, but then you see it.
It is difficult. There is a couple of nasty corners as a first right-hander and then a left-hander into the finishing straight, and they can't start to play cat and mouse. Uchikov caught out there because he wanted Armstrong to come by him on the right-hand side, but Armstrong, as soon as the pace slowed, lifted it, came to the front. He doesn't want to start playing around for a position in the sprint until we get a little bit closer to the line, because don't forget, we've got two riders chasing, Bruno Kenghielter, and in fact, Uchikov now wants the cars out of the way so he can look back down the straight there to see what the situation is, where the other two riders are.
So after a tranquil day in the Tour de France, we're now reaching those nervous moments of desperation in the last couple of kilometers of the stage. 2 to go. They're under the banner. And almost inside the final mile to the finish now. Armstrong no longer anxious to go and help Sergei Uchikov with the pacemaking.
Armstrong looking good. He's just checking that everything's in place. He's looking down at his gears to make sure he doesn't make a mistake when we come into the final kilometre. He looks still nervous enough to me. He looks very lucid. He looks as if he's got the ability to respond, the ability to explode, which is what he needs to do when he comes into that last kilometre, when he sees the finishing straight and he sees the banner across the line in front of him.
Well, they'll make the right turn very shortly now. Then they will see the 1 kilometre to go kite hanging across the bridge, which the Tour de France puts up every day in the Tour de France. Sergei Uchikov, to me, looks as though he's under a little bit of pressure here now just to hang on to Lance Armstrong. So if I was a betting man, I'd go for the Motorola rider, because Armstrong is itching to get at him, I think.
Well, he's got the twitch, definitely. Every time he can, he gets out of the saddle, he's using his arms, feeling for his responses, trying to see how good he is at the moment, but he knows that when they get closer to the finish, Uchikov is going to try and outfox him, he's going to try and outwit him, and it's going to be a very difficult sprint. But Armstrong will be getting power from his confidence, the fact that he's won a stage in the Tour de France before, and that's what he was waiting for. That's the red kite, the flamme rouge. 1 kilometre to go.
What an amazing Tour de France this is. This is now the next 3 riders out on the course, and they are still 1 kilometre from the summit of the climb. And Armstrong now in the front and doesn't want to be there, so he now looks over to Uchikov to see if he'll take the lead.
He's forced Uchikov into the first position on the road. There's the left-hander. It won't be very long now before they can see at the end of this big long straightaway the Coca-Cola banner across, which signifies the end of the stage.
And it's going to be about now where Sergei Uchikov realises he made a mess of that. He shouldn't have gone round the corner into the lead, because Lance has him where he wants him now, and he's not going to come by him again until he goes for the gears and gives him just about all the speed he has left in those legs after what has been a tremendously long day in the saddle for all of the breakaway. Uchikov is going to ride close to the barriers on the left, so Armstrong must come over on his right shoulder. Give him only one way. Armstrong now begins to make his move. Uchikov goes immediately, but goes right to the centre of the road. Armstrong holding the back wheel of Uchikov. Very shortly, Armstrong is going to have to kick, but I don't think he's got it. Uchikov has everything. Uchikov takes it on the line. Armstrong will be very, very annoyed about that, but he never had it on the line. He had to take second place as we go back now to the two chasing riders. A win, the first ever win for him in a stage of the Tour de France, for Sergei Uchikov. But now we're looking at the fight here for the third place on the line. And Kengi Alta, who must rue the mistake he made on the climb, is now coming in behind Bueno Hora, who's made big time gains today, and I think will be a top 13 contender by the end of the stage, and that will be his reward. And Kengi Alta will wait for as long as possible now. He's made his mistake, he's lost the stage, but now he's going to show us the sprint he would have used had he been in the competition for first place. Kengi Alta comes clear of Bueno Hora to take third place today, just on about a minute behind the winner today, Uchikov. Well, Bueno Hora even finds sprinting a speciality as well. It will go to the photo there. Now Perona looking to see who wants to take him on. He's doing just enough to keep the speed up, but he wants them to still come at him so he can start to rev. But now he's going to have to go for it, and Malaysia is chasing him. Andreu is sitting there quite coolly, but I'm not sure that Frankie indeed is going to take part in this one. He's come along for the ride to protect the team of Motorola and Armstrong, so he'll finish behind, and in fact it's going to be a really tight finish, but the rider taking, I think it was Perona, ahead of Malaysia, with Andreu in sixth place. And there's the sprint there, which gave the victory to Perona for fifth, and Malaysia was sixth, and Frankie Andreu seventh. Well, here comes the main field, being led by Jimenio Diaz-Zabala of Once, with Neil Stevens just behind as they line up for the finish. They're all going to lead out Laurent Jalabert, but I'll tell you what, this is for 12th place. A number of riders have nipped off the front of the peloton in the closing kilometres. They've already finished, and they've got Bruno Cornier just in front of them. Diaz-Zabala now trying to bring Laurent Jalabert to be the best of the rest. There's Cornier, he might just hang on. Now it's a final kick by Neil Stevens, then he'll swing away, and then they'll try and launch Laurent Jalabert. I don't see, oh, do I see? No, I don't see, in fact. Yes, there he is, popped out now. Jamaluddin Abdul-Jabbarov coming clear on the right to take on Laurent Jalabert. He's going to steal a couple of points in the green jersey, but it won't really matter today, and Jalabert tried a little kick at the end. Look at the time gap, 19 minutes and 19 seconds on the line. New names on the result board tonight as Sergei Uchikov gets his first win on stage 13. Lucky for him. Lance Armstrong was second and Bruno Kengi Alta third. The fourth place went to Hernan Bueno Hora. The favourites, well, they were sunbathing today as they came in almost 20 minutes back.
Were you surprised how quick Uchikov was when it came to the line? Because you still looked pretty good yourself.
I was surprised. I mean, they said he was fast, but I didn't think it was that fast.
How does it feel to get so close to a stage victory in the Tour after 93? It's been a long time.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, I really feel bad. I can't tell you how disappointed I am.
And the man who packed the sprint tonight, Sergei Uchikov, the Ukrainian, all smiles tonight. His Polti team still have all 9 men in the race, and they all lined up to pay tribute to him. On the eve of the Pyrenees, no change in the top 6 overall, but the raid by Bueno Hora has brought him up to 9th place. Armstrong has climbed to 26th, while British rider Max Chiandri is now the only home rider flying the flag. Another yellow jersey tonight for Miguel Indurain, and while his glorious race continues toward Paris, Sean Yates prepares now to leave his 12th Tour de France tonight, out of the race with tendinitis. And don't forget, it's your last chance to enter our competition to name the winner of the stage tomorrow to Guzeneige in the Pyrenees. The phone number to ring, and the lines are open, by the way, until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, is 0891 444477. The winner will receive a set of race leaders' jerseys. And the best of luck with the competition. Well, tomorrow we go into the Pyrenees, and it will become the battle to Guzeneige. And I'm quite sure that Miguel Indurain will not be coming in almost 20 minutes behind the day's winner. But today we all had a chance to admire the most beautiful scenery in this part of France. Until tomorrow at 6:45, Goodbye.